I'm going to make a little drawing of a painting by Vermeer. I printed it in black and white with a laser printer. And I just start with the eyes. They are a bit isolated. So you just see two black holes almost, two black spots. And I just start with sort of hatchings and I'm not really being careful. I'm just drawing a little bit and just positioning the different parts by adding tonal values with hatchings and accentuations, and as I draw along I correct certain things as well. So if the nose is a little bit too high, I can correct it along the way by placing it a little bit lower or something. And this drawing is built up from sort of hatchings or scribblings, and which function as tonal values, and that's the way this gets built up. And here you see on the right side some extra accentuations, some extra dark spots, and now I add a hatching like sort of dark veil to get the shadows right, or at least a bit darker for the moment. And I find it important that the expression is there from quite early on. I think I will add some music to this video because it's about 13 minutes, so I'm not going to talk all the time. And there I gradually add sort of layers of hatchings, like veils on top of each other, so the tonal values get to the correct darkness. And there the mouth. And I was a bit careless placing everything, so I'm not sure if everything is really correct. But sometimes I just like to start a drawing and just go along with, go with the flow. Here I try to add a very delicate tonal value, so it's good to practice the intensity of hatchings when you are making drawings, so you can also add a very delicate layer of hatchings, delicate tonal value. Here the earring, the pearl with a few accentuations, I try to suggest it. And everything is about suggesting in this drawing. Nothing is really very detailed. And it's really getting more defined as I go along. So as I progress with this drawing, I add layers of hatchings and getting the tonal values further, adjusting the forms. Shadow of the head. Vermeer has always been my favorite painter. I think his works are like magic. And I think I saw this painting years ago, and it's a very small painting. Sometimes I wonder if is this a Vermeer or not, but it probably is. But it's made differently than his usual paintings, so it's a more, more spontaneous looking painting, actually not as refined as his other works, but that gives it a certain charm as well. So you would want that he would have made more of these type of paintings. And now I add some atmosphere by, and this is also for the composition of the drawing as a whole. To what extent do you add hatchings and definition to the surrounding areas, which is a sort of background for the face, because I focus mainly on the face, but around the face you want to have some sort of background or atmosphere as well. There I indicated the form of her head, and now I add a very broad hatching to get her face a little darker, to get the shadows more convincingly there. And my hatchings go in all directions, really. I'm not a very disciplined person in that respect. They go all the way, but I think there is some coordination. I don't want hatchings too dominantly in one direction, so that's usually what's happening when I change direction in the hatchings, that I make them more diffuse in direction, so it functions as a tonal value and you see all kinds of lines, but not one direction is really dominant. No, you can make a drawing and have all the hatchings in one direction and it can work fine, but I personally prefer this. I see in her cheek I had a subtle tonal value on the right side of a lighted of the lighted part of a face. I like that. I don't want lights and dark being too harsh next to each other, although sometimes it might work, but there has to be some sort of subtle area from one to the other part, from very dark to very light. There has to be something in between often. Going over the eyes. Some accentuations. Where I'm accentuating now, I have to be careful not to give her a beard. Her chin and under lip. And while I add these accentuations, I always try to keep in mind her expression. So on the one hand you want to correct, the tonal values must be correct, but it has to be expressive. You want to write expression on her face. And the shadow of the head gives me the opportunity to get some dark accentuations, which is nice for the composition overall, actually. There, the nose and the mouth, they are being defined a little more, so when you progress in the drawing you can go over some details, go back to them and refine them even more, or more, because they weren't really refined. Another hatching in another direction. When you compare it to what was there before. And as I said, I don't want to have one dominant direction in those hatchings, so they go all kinds of directions. And on the left I actually combine certain dark areas, so the shadow of her head and her hair, I think, or whatever there is, that forms a larger part which is dark, which is interesting for the composition as a whole. I actually like the kind of snapshot like observation of this painting. It is carefully crafted and composed, but there's something very spontaneous about it, as how she looks. Going over certain details again. And with a drawing like this you can wonder to what extent you add details. Here I try to suggest something of the structure of the head, of the colors of the head. There are some lines on that head, so I try to suggest something of that. But the question is, to what extent do you work on this drawing? Do you finish this? Because when you go on too long on a drawing like this, it might lose its spontaneity, and it gets a bit, you know, when it gets tedious in the execution, one has to stop. I'm not suggesting that it is already tedious now, but one has to look out for that. And I try to be as bold and spontaneous in the end as I started it, with the drawing like this. Sometimes one does not have to be too refined. One has to watch out not to be too refined. Sometimes there are different phases, so you start boldly and you are more careful later, but sometimes it's good to finish the drawing like you started it. And now I try to make a little composition with this pencil. But it's a spontaneous drawing. And thank you for watching. I hope you liked it, and maybe you can subscribe to my channel. Bye.